Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Apex Racing TV, and welcome back to the Evolution Sim Racing GT3 Championship. This is round number 9 of the season, coming to you tonight from Sebring. My name is Ron Mullins. Alongside me in the commentary booth is Aaron Smith, and in the virtual production hall, we have Josh Wilkie. Tonight, we're here in Florida to see the possible crowning of some brand new champions. And also, we got 2 more 30-minute long races in the dying breaths of this season. Now, Aaron, as we enter the final stage of this season, there's a lot weighing on these drivers' minds. So heading into this round in particular, what would you say is the thing that's probably bugging these drivers the most?
Well, just the fact that in these final few rounds, a driver's mentality, especially when fighting for a championship, it really can take a huge effect on their on-track performance. And I've witnessed it firsthand. I've also done it firsthand. You know, you get towards the end of a season, the championship is within reaching distance, but for some drivers, it's just the pressure gets to them. It's a little bit too much. But luckily for a lot of our championship leaders, at least in 2 of our categories, they got a fairly comfortable lead. Currently, Denner Brager in the elite category, a 53-point lead. And, well, Lucchesi did say last week that that can obviously swing at any moment, and he is, of course, correct. But it does just make his life a lot more difficult than it probably needed to be. And for the 2-time champion, it looks like his defense this season is going to go a bit awry. But of course, still 4 races to go, so anything can indeed happen in the premieres. You'd probably say Brecht Bearings has just been absolutely incredible these last, 7-8 rounds, as Matt Hoyland has just struggled for that consistency, like we mentioned, time and time again. And he has a 72-point lead, so pretty much got one hand on the trophy already for the Belgium. And then in our Evo category, it's actually surprisingly close. Ashley Brooks, after a return to form in these past few rounds, only 14 points ahead of Francois Brandet, who had a fantastic middle part of the season. So it's going to be close between the Frenchman and the Brit for the Evo championship, but the other 2 categories are looking pretty dead set, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it's seemingly fairly set in stone for the Premier and the Elite standings. I mean, there's still a lot that can happen between now and the end of the season, despite the fact this is the second to last round. 9 of 10, do the math in your head right there. Still got 4 more races left. We got 2 30-minute ones here tonight, and then we're going to cap the season off in 1 week's time on Thanksgiving at Laguna Seca for 2 more 30-minute long races. Sadly, I will not be a part of those shows, but it's still looking fairly good. I think the driver who's probably looking the most to be the presumptive champion is going to be Brecht Bearings. I mean, 72 points in that premier standings off the back of 4 straight wins, which was followed by 2 straight runner-up finishes. He's been very consistent all throughout the season. Matt Hoyland, on the other hand, been very inconsistent, to say the very least. He's gotten some wins and some podiums as well, but outside of those wins and podiums, he's DNF'd in the other races and finished 13th out of 11 in the other 2. So he's, a pretty spotty driver, for lack of a better term, in that premier standing. So we'll have to wait and see how things are going to shake out in that premier class. If Brecht Bearings has a really good race here, we can pretty much crown him the champion in the premier standings. His brother Ruben in the elite standings has actually put on a pretty good charge throughout this season, currently in 4th as it stands at the moment. A little bit farther back, over 100 points back of Dennis Breget, still in that championship lead, who, despite the fact he was a little bit inconsistent to kick this season off, really cranked up that consistency as of late, and certainly showing a lot of pace here at Sebring as he's leading the practice session as it stands at the moment. And that's a pretty good lap time for the driver of the RDSA Esports McLaren, in front of Ruben Bearings in P2, and fairly slotted in 3rd with Chessie all the way down in 5th. So, I mean, even though we are in practice, so there's not too much to read into this, having about 0.7 of a second between 2 teammates, especially teammates locked steady in a very close championship fight, a little bit disconcerting if you're Luke Lucchesi.
Yeah, this Sebring track has always been a bit of a struggle, no matter what category you run in, to be honest. It's a track that I think a lot of people just can't really get to grips with. I'm a bit iffy with it. I think I've always been okay around Sebring. It's never been one of my strongest tracks, but I've never, seen it on the schedule inside. It's just one of those tracks which is like, yeah, okay, Sebring's alright, it's decent for racing. If you get pit stops, which of course today we won't have to worry about, but, the pit stop strategy battles around here can be really interesting as well. So the racing can be good. I think in these GT3 cars, it's going to be very, very good. I think this is probably one of the best track and car combinations in terms of racing, Sebring and GT3s. It's just when you start getting higher downforce around here, like Formula 3 or GTP, then it can get a bit more tricky, especially coming through the Le Mans, turn 11, 12, and 13 section. That can get a bit tricky, but I think in these GT3s they can use a lot of the curbs on the inside, so they should be fine. And at the moment, at least in this session, the times are fairly close from all the way from first all the way down to last. It's only about 2.5 seconds. And hopefully Dean Powell will be able to take us on a full lap here at Sebring at turn 1. Very, very quick, very, very tricky though. Can lose about half a second through there if you get it wrong. Look for the braking markers on the outside and turning in, using all of those curbs in these GT3s, because you can. In any other car you'd probably die on the inside of those curbs. Bit wide there from Dean Powell on the outside, getting on that gravel, and then a fairly long back straight here. A decent overtaking opportunity all the way down here into the turn 7 hairpin, hard on the brakes, probably the harshest braking point on the track. Very tricky hairpin to get round, and then punch the throttle all the way out of here and hope that the car sticks to the ground. Luckily, these guys have traction control, so they don't have to worry too much about that. Then coming into Cunningham Corner again, very hard on the brakes. Watching for that inside, went a tiny bit wide there, probably lost about a tenth or two through there. Coming through here flat out in these GT3 cars. Very, very tricky corners to get right. You kind of have to brake as you're turning in, which can lead to some disastrous moments, but Dean pulling that corner off a tower very, very nicely. And then coming through here, which is always tricky in multi-class racing, and then braking once again, turning in very, very early. Missed those curbs ever so slightly, and choosing not to use the curbs too much in this Mercedes, so perhaps struggling a tad in this car, then using all of the curb on the outside. And remember that Sebring was one of the first tracks in iRacing to receive the 3D curb update, and we've had a few more tracks since then. Coming into the final corner now, you kind of have to brake towards the inside, don't want to wash out too much too early, and then stamp on the throttle, use all of the track on the outside to make sure you gain as much time as possible. Didn't look like he was pushing too much on that lap, looked like it was a fairly simple one from Dean. And it was alright. It was about a 2 minute Dead 0.3, so not too bad, and he currently sits 14th overall.
And that was a pretty good lap from him, and a very well done track guide there, Aaron. Well done on that. It's very tough trying to keep tabs around this racetrack. Of course, 17 corners in all, albeit American tracks aren't really too good at labeling their corner numbers. I have brought this up many times on the air in the past. Sebring, kind of one of those tracks where you got a lot of corners, some of them just not being labeled at all, but it is still a wonderful ride in the world of motorsports. And you brought up a very good point there in reference to Dean Powell in that Mercedes, Aaron, heading his way into Le Mans of turn number 16 through that section before the Ullman straightaway to pretty much bring this lap to just about a close heading into Sunset Bend. That section, I don't know about you, Aaron, I have some terrible memories of those curbs hitting them. It feels like, I mean, you're in Florida, so I guess you have to invoke a little bit of maritime terminology. It feels like a shark tooth curb. That's the only way I can describe it. The amount of times that I've run wide heading into turn number 15, drifted down to those curbs, beached myself, I was just in a world of trouble, would beggar belief. You can kind of see it there as we're following Joe Preston in the JSD DXT at number 41 Porsche in the Evo category. You can see those curbs really jagged on the outside line. So I'm not sure about you, Aaron, but I have some pretty bad nightmares about the curbs heading through that section.
Yeah, you're not alone in that at all. I think it was last year I was doing the 12 hours of Sebring in the BMW GTP. I believe it was like one of the first things people did when that car came out. And yeah, going through the Le Mans section, I think we got a rear tyre slightly on one of those curbs, and it sent us round one of the weirdest spins I've ever experienced in iRacing, and we slammed into the wall, and it broke our drive shaft, as Brandette in the background going for a spin there. But yeah, broke our drive shaft, and that was our race over before it had even started. And Malcolm, that is not, you take turn one, far too optimistic with the downforce levels of this GT3 car, as he went very wide, and again, the only Corvette in the entire series, and well, maybe that's why he's the only Corvette in the entire series. Not much grip there through turn one, but yeah, our Sebring 12-hour ended very quickly after that. It was about 50-minute repairs on like lap 3 of the race, so we all just collectively agreed, yeah, let's just go home.
Yeah, I can't necessarily blame you for that judgment at all. That is disheartening if ever I've heard of a disheartening incident in the world of iRacing. Gotta say, Aaron, I've been hit by that silver bullet hang through that section as well as a couple of seasons ago with the Radical Esports Cup, which you can catch every single Friday here on Apex Racing TV. Aaron's on the call, Josh is on the cameras for that. But I remember running in an official race, used to be on those broadcasts, and stepped out of the broadcast booth, got behind the wheel, running in the top split race being broadcasted here on Apex, and heading through there was a driver, tried to get a move done on me, heading down the inside into turn number 15, drifted off, hit that curb, and I tried to slip around the outside of them thinking, hey, this is a pretty simple move. He went off the track, may as well slip through and get that position back, but it turns out, nope, hit that curb, bounced it off in a really odd way, and then hip-checked me into the side of my race car, and that was, I wouldn't say it was the end of my race, but I picked up some damage in those sensitive, very aero-sensitive Radical SR10s. Any sort of damage can really wreck your race, so that's kind of what happened to me a couple of seasons ago, so I gotta say that section, such a tricky part of this racetrack, historic as well. Of course, it's hosted the Sebring 12-hour year after year. It's one of my favorite sports car races, and as a resident American here on these broadcasts, I feel like my opinion holds a bit more weight. I prefer it to the 24 hours of Daytona, funnily enough, but it's still a pretty, I mean, they're all fantastic events, don't get me wrong. The Rolex 24 at Daytona, the Sebring 12, and the Moto Petit Le Mans, just absolutely fantastic. A sports car classic every single year to tune into in terms of stuff going on here stateside, but Sebring, a wonderful track. Hasn't had many changes as of late. The latest change coming to that Turn 7 hairpin in the very early 2000s or late 90s, if I recall correctly. That outside access road runoff area, whatever you want to call it, on the outside of the hairpin of turn number 7, used to be the original line. Then they kind of changed it up a little bit. You could just barely see it in the back of shot as we were following Danny Weir in that DXT Cyan Audi, currently 12th in the practice session, which is slowly drawing to a close. I gotta say, we're coming up to one of the other very challenging sections of this racetrack, Aaron. Tower Bend of turn number 13, hang through the kink of 12 now, trying to sight this corner is so hard with that killer curve on the inside. You can see we are hitting it in the number 55 car. I don't know about you, Aaron, but that's another corner that I just feel like I can never get right, regardless of what kind of race car I'm running around here in.
I'm just listening to this majestic V10 Audi. I'm sorry, it's just absolutely glorious. But yes, you are very much correct. Turn 13 is an absolute... you understand the word I'm trying to use. It's so tricky. The braking into that corner is incredibly hard because, like I mentioned earlier, you don't just brake in a straight line for that corner. You kind of have to go towards the inside, then brake in a straight line so it puts you on the outside of the corner, and then turn in. It's a very awkward corner to get right, and one of the more important corners here at Sebring, because if you get it wrong, you're going to be incredibly vulnerable going down the Bishop Straight, as the checkered flag now waves for the practice session, and they can all start getting ready for the qualifying session, which actually I think is going to be really interesting. Off tracks aren't too much of a worry around here, so I think it's going to be fairly close for pole positions in all three of our classes.
Yeah, I think it may be a very close fight in this qualifying session, which is set to begin right about now. 15 minutes long. These drivers have 4 laps to try and get the job done. Single car qualifying, so you won't have to worry about traffic or any of your competitors. Maybe throwing some smoke into the air. Maybe throwing some of those cones that you see on the outside of Sunset Bend. A lot of stuff can happen between now and the end of this qualifying session, but it's going to be possibly one of the most important ones. Certainly in that elite category, a driver like Luke Lucchesi, he needs to impress, I think, at this point in time. He's a reigning 2-time series champion in that elite category. However, this season, I mean, he's been going tit for tat with his teammate Tristan Dennebrega, but he's run into some trouble as well. He's been a little bit inconsistent as of late. Some unfortunate mistakes towards the end of the first race at Watkins Glen kind of set him with a crash course of absolute disaster. So at this point in time, if you are Luke Lucchesi, gonna try and hope for some good things to come out of the 2 races that we have here at Sebring, because considering that gap between himself and his teammates, just having some good results on the board is really the only thing that can save his championship hopes.
Yeah, and well, Lucchesi definitely sounded a bit defeated when we were speaking to him last week, but he still sounded a tiny bit optimistic, saying that, of course, there is still a lot that can happen in these 4 30-minute races that we have left in this season, and he is, of course, absolutely right. Anything can happen. Dennebrega's car could just spontaneously combust at any moment, so, that is an possibility. But unfortunately for Lucchesi, the McLaren looks fairly strong around the Sebring track in that practice session. All 3 of our drivers who were leading their respective classes, all of them were in McLaren 720Ss, so yeah, the Porsche still looks as strong as usual, so it's not going to be a complete, Dennebrega's not going to run away with it or anything, but it's just going to be that little bit more tricky for Lucchesi than he probably would have hoped.
Yeah, that's a good point that you bring up there, Aaron. When it comes to what cars have been very fast all throughout this season, that Porsche has seemingly had the upper hand throughout a decent chunk of this season, which is a little bit surprising to me, Aaron. The only GT3 car, up-to-date GT3 car, I should say, that I own at the moment is that Porsche. And I don't know, maybe it's just me. I'm more of a prototype guy when it comes to sports car racing. In terms of road racing, period, I'm more of an open-wheel guy than a prototype or a sports car driver, period. So I don't know, maybe my perspective's just a little bit off, but this Porsche has always seemed like a little bit of a woolly handler, very much setup dependent, which I think could possibly be part of the reason why the Porsches have been very good all throughout this season, because we do have open setups for the first time in the history of the Evolution Sim Racing GT3 Championship, so I think that could be part of the reason why those Porsches have been able to kick on the Hyperjets in certain points of this season. However, they're going to be feeling the burn, literally and figuratively. Take a look at the weather conditions right now. 41 degrees Celsius is a track temperature compared to the ambient temperature being only 18 C. For anyone following Fahrenheit, much like myself, I will bring you up to date and say the ambient temperature, that's 65 degrees Fahrenheit. The track temperature, 106 So Floridian weather, it's always boiling hot in some way. Gotta say, the relative humidity at only 30% makes me believe that Sebring somehow moved up north instead of being down in Florida, because usually the air in Florida is just basically like walking through soup. But pretty rough conditions for these drivers. That's what, like a 40-degree difference, Fahrenheit degree difference, that is, in terms of the ambient temperature versus a track temperature. So, I don't know, Aaron, on that setup discussion, conditions like this may be a little bit tricky to try and hone down for some of these drivers, especially at the beginning of the race.
Yeah, those hotter conditions are going to be doing a number on those Michelin tyres, especially on the Porsche, which we've heard is one of the harsher cars on its tyres as a whole compared to a lot of its competitors, as we're now coming towards the end of these first laps. Not expecting any, absolute breathtaking laps on this first one, as Ruben admittedly was just stabbing at the wheel through that final corner. So maybe he is pushing on this first lap, as he does go second. So impressive lap time there from Behrens on his first outing here at Sebring. Dennebrega, of course, though, on top by 3/10 at the moment. And like I mentioned earlier on, you don't really have to worry about off-tracks around here at Sebring. There's like 1 or 2 corners, which maybe you do. But it's basically, if you get an off-track, something's gone wrong. You've gone wide somewhere, or you've completely bottled your lap. So, yeah, I think these guys should just be honing in the laps, pounding them all throughout this qualifying session. And like I said, it should be fairly close, I think, for all of our pole positions.
Yeah, it's going to be a very close fight for these drivers. A track like Sebring is one that a lot of these drivers kind of know it as if it's on the back of their hand. It is a track which is very popular on the iRacing platform, very popular in the world as well. It's an absolutely wonderful racetrack. Was the first road course to ever host a Formula One Grand Prix in the United States, Aaron. I believe me kind of specifying road course may have given it away, but do you know the first track to ever host a Formula One Grand Prix in the United States?
Watkins Glen? Maybe? I don't know.
Indianapolis, the 1950 Indy 500, back in that very brief period of time when the Indy 500 was part of the Formula One World Championship. That's honestly, F1 history tends to neglect the Indy 500, which is very interesting, because I was actually doom scrolling through, I forget whether it was YouTube Shorts or whether it was Instagram or what, but I remember seeing something about, I'm trying to remember, it was like how far back certain drivers had started a race and ended up going on to win it, after what Max Verstappen did at the Brazilian Grand Prix a couple of weeks ago. Spoilers, folks. Actually, that was like 3 weeks ago. I feel like spoilers are kind of not very necessary for that. But seeing that little graphic, I saw that one of the lowest starters to end up taking the checkered flag was actually Bill Vukovic, a 2-time winner of the Indy 500. So, technically speaking, if there were ever to be a storyline like that, it was going to come out of Indy, because even back then they had 33 starters, as they do to this day. Back when they had like 50 to 60 people trying to qualify for the race. Some nice Indy lore, as we see Alex Fredwell in the Premier category, the driver of the Lamborghini, heading his way off into turn number 1, the 152 Lamborghini, now on the provisional pole in the Premier category. Nice lap from King to stick it on the pole in the Elites. Coming up to the halfway mark of this qualifying session with Ashley Brooks, the driver of the McLaren in the Evo class, grabbing a pole in that category. Brooks has just had a complete turnaround all throughout this season. Started it very good, ran into a really big rough patch. The rough patch was about as slick as 80 grit sandpaper. It was not a good time if you were Ashley Brooks, but things have turned around for him, and as of late, as he's risen and his title rival at a certain point in time, Francois Brandet, has begun to fall back. That's part of the reason why in the Evo category, it's one of the closest championship fights that we have. Only 14 points between Francois Brandet and Ashley Brooks in the championship lead. As it stands at the moment, though, in this qualifying session, looks like first blood is going to go to Brooks behind the wheel of that number 19 McLaren. That's a pretty good lap time for him overall, as well as he finds himself in 14th in front of the championship leader in the Premier category, Brecht Behring. So this is a very good qualifying result for Ashley Brooks as it stands at the moment.
Yeah, very good first few laps there from the Brit, and well, it's just important that he keeps this pace going, not just in this qualifying session, but into the race as well. He needs to be smart as well. We've seen time and time again you know, some drivers in different categories making some silly mistakes and fighting with cars that they probably shouldn't be, and it's ruining their championship hopes. And I think Ashley, having that mid-season slump, has definitely learned a lot and has started to come back once again into the fray, as Victor Van Zies taking an interesting line there through turns 1 and 2 there. And that's definitely going to be his lap time invalidated, as here is Martin Koch as well. Bit of a slow start for him qualifying, getting a bit out of shape there on the entry into turn 13, and not looking very confident in that Porsche. And it does look like a bit of a tough car to handle around this Sebring circuit. And as much as Lucchesi said he would be strong round here, unfortunately the car might be the thing letting him down the most, as that, I don't know, that Porsche just does look a bit all over the place, at least in the hands of some of these other guys. I'm not sure what it looks like in the hands of likes of Lucchesi. I mean, we have a Porsche who's currently on pole position, so maybe I'm chatting out my backside, but I don't know, it just does look a bit wayward.
I think, Aaron, it honestly goes back to the point that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago in reference to the fact that the Porsche is very much so a setup-dependent car, as we see Koch mega sideways coming out of Sunset Bend. I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing this major pace discrepancy. Some of the drivers in the McLaren, it's like a declawed cat trying to climb up an igloo. They're skidding that hard. Other times, for the case of a driver like King or Bearings, they're pretty lock steady on. That was a pretty big slide from Koch as we cut to this view of Danny Lee in another car that seems to be a little bit wayward at times, that Mercedes-Benz with a front hood or a front bonnet, whatever you want to call it, that can land that could really double as an aircraft carrier. It is a pretty odd car in the world of GT3 racing. But getting back to the point I was going to mention in reference to the Porsches, you got a setup-dependent car running in a series where open setups are allowed around a racetrack like this as well, Aaron, where I feel like setups are probably more important around here than any other track we've visited thus far this season. So I think maybe having that sort of stuff is part of the reason why that's the case. And Francois Brandet very much feeling frustrated, the driver of that Porsche, hitting the barrier, and I will keep my mouth shut.
Fair enough, Ron. As Stefan Gattuso coming round the final few corners. Yeah, of course, perfectly understandable. As Gattuso coming across the line, is this going to be a competitive lap from him? It's not. So he's going to have probably one more go at this Sebring circuit. And, Stefan has had a bit of an awkward season, to be fair. I mean, of course, he got that race win at round 6. But apart from that, he hasn't had a single podium since. But it's not like he didn't deserve that win, because he got in the lead and absolutely shot away from the rest of the grid, and it was a very, very good drive from him. But yeah, just the rest of the season hasn't really gone the Italian's way, and maybe will this qualifying lap kind of determine what his day is going to be like. It looks fairly neat and tidy through this first sector so far. Will it count at the end of this lap? Will he be able to put himself at least into the top 10, which I think is going to be kind of the minimum that you'd expect from Stefan? Nice and late on the brakes. Tiny little bit of ABS kicking in there as he went into turn 10. Now, of course, turn 13, where we've seen a couple drivers mess it up already. Late on the brakes. Did hit that inside curb a tad bit. You want to get as close as humanly possible to that curb, but just about missing it for the fastest run through there. And it's not looking too bad. And now braking once again for turn 15, missing the curb slightly, little bit of a twitch from the rear end as he gets hard on the brakes for Le Mans, still twitching all over the place at the rear. The Ferrari really not getting on well, especially in that Le Mans section. It just didn't look like it had the rear stability for it at all. And now coming down towards Sunset Bend, turn 17. Little bit late on the brakes there, but still hitting his markers nicely. Now he just needs to stamp on it and hope that the downforce kicks in as he pummels his way all the way to the line. Is it going to be a competitive lap from Stefan? And it doesn't look like it. It was about 0.3 slower than his personal best. So P15 for one of your race winners this season. Not really a good session there for Stefan Gattuso.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but I gotta say, the only time he's grabbed a victory thus far this season was at one of the other two 30-minute rounds that we had earlier on in the season at Interlagos, so we may end up seeing Gattuso play a role in this race that we have coming up. Gotta say, this qualifying session, for lack of a better term, is just about over. I'm looking through. I don't believe there's a single car out there on the racetrack at this very moment. So it looks like qualifying, that is over, folks. That's going to be Luke King grabbing the pole position. Tristan Denabrega looking to join him on the front row. In the Premier category, it looks like it is going to be Brecht Behrings trying to seal the deal in that Premier Class Championship fight. Looks like he's going to be starting 12th overall and the top runner in the Elite category. Actually got to take a look at Luke Lucchesi and his qualifying session. This was... He's currently qualified in 4th at this point in time with a little bit of lawn mowing heading on to that back straightaway. But Lucchesi currently qualified in 4th, so I guess his chances of doing well in this race, I certainly wouldn't rule it out. He's going to be starting right behind his teammate of Denabrega, as he's going to be right in front of him on that front row. But that's going to be the clash of titans, to be sure. Between Denabrega and Lucchesi, that's going to be really interesting to follow.
Yeah, it certainly will be. It's going to be the thing that we're all keeping an eye out for, but Denabrega looking very strong in that second place, as that is not the line you want to be taking through turn 1, and especially when you're facing the wrong way. Well, I don't think they have a reverse layout here, but oh well. He's ended up all the way down there, I believe, in 30th place. He was 29th, so I was close enough, but here's the grid.
Yeah, let's get that starting grid loaded up for you, and it's going to be Luke King starting this race from the pole. We got full pace left, so I feel like I can take my sweet old time with this. So the South African behind the wheel of the 234 Alpha 1 esports car going to grab the pole position at a 1 minute 59.341, which is a pretty good lap time there in the process. Gotta say, a little bit quicker than the time he set in practice, I believe. So that's a pretty good lap time from him to grab the pole position. Joining him on the front row is going to be Tristan Denabrega, the RDSA esports man behind the wheel of that 270 McLaren. Going to start in 2nd, Andrew Fairley. Going to be starting in 3rd, Luke Lucchesi, another RDSA esports driver. Looking to challenge his teammate starting in 2nd. He'll be starting right behind him on the 4th starting spot. Ryan Odens going to be starting in 5th. Ruben Behrings going to join him on the 3rd row. Then we have Dean Powell starting this race from the 7th position in the 222 car, joined on that 4th row by the Brit of Tom Weston. And rounding out your top 10 is going to be the 9th place starter of Luke Van Gortel and the 10th place starter of Jean Brainback, Daniel Lee, who's been incredibly impressive to follow all throughout the season. A pretty nice guy as well. He's going to be starting at 11th. Brecht Behrings, the premier pole sitter, going to be starting in 12th. Should be noted that in these 30-minute long races, a top 12 invert. So that's something we definitely have to keep our eyes on for this first race to set the grid for race number 2. That's going to be Darren Sharple starting in lucky number P13. Paul Colishall going to join him on that 7th row. Alex Fretwell going to be starting in 15th. Ashley Brooks going to be starting in 16th from the Evo pole. And rounding out your top 20 is going to be the 17th place starter of Thomas Pugh for Axis Sim Sports on the number 18 car. I believe he may actually be an Evo driver just based off the number 18. Not sure if there's maybe some sort of misnumbering there or what, but either way, he's going to be starting in 17th. Stefano Gattuso going to be starting in P18. Then we have Malcolm Coates representing the only Corvette in the field. The American going to be starting in 19th. And Robin Noel Brown, the Evo driver, going to round out your top 20.
And then your other 26 drivers at the bottom of the field. Rolf Turfkruer in 21st place, and then Chris Jennings in 22nd. The top 22 drivers separated by a second. That is just how close it is here at Sebring. And, you know, one of the oldest tracks on iRacing. Not too surprised, to be fair. As Stefan Donnelly in 23rd place, Marcel Breitenbach in 24th. 25th place is going to be Rob McKee. 26th is Hussein Slesser. 27th, Christopher Radolf. 28th is Francois Brandet. 29th is Victor Van Zies. 30th is Joe Sparrow. 31st is Scott Kostrick. 32nd is Matt Hoyland. Another difficult session for him by the looks of it. 33rd is John Ludbrook. 34th, Jeffrey Darman. 35th, Martin Koch. 36th, Liam Kelso. 37th, James Pallow. 38th, Gareth Newton. 39th is Chris Keenan. 40th place is James Horworth. And then your final 6 drivers of Joe Preston, Danny Weir, Dennis Collar, Corey Price, Robin Aston, and Sean Clark, rounding out this fairly stacked 46-car grid.
And thankfully, we were able to get through all of that before they even hit turn number 7. It's a very long lap under pacing conditions. 3.74 miles long as it's built by iRacing, 17 corners marked by iRacing as well. Probably a little bit more curves in the road, but hey, they call it 17, so we'll call it 17 as well. Gotta say, this is a very odd question to ask before we're about to get started on what could be a very dramatic day of racing action with some championship implications that are certainly going to be hanging on these drivers' minds. Gotta wonder if iRacing ever had a track like the Isle of Man TT circuit, for instance, how big of a grid we'd be able to get through before they'd grab the starting grid, because that track's like 46 miles long or something like that, so chances are probably be able to get through like, I don't know, 1,000 names. Our vocal cords would be just done by the end of it, but you know, it takes all kinds to make the world go around. When it comes to some people, we need to stop the rotation. These drivers still rotating their wheels, and on this pace lap, coming out of turn number 13, heading their way back onto the airfield section, which is pretty much how this track first started off in existence. But Aaron, first race of the evening, going to have some real big implications. Of all the drivers running in this field, who do you think is going to be the one feeling the most pressure? Is it going to be our pole man is it going to be our pole sitter of Luke King, or is it going to be one of those RDSA esports drivers?
I think it will be one of the RDSE esports drivers. I think Luke King, at this point in the season, you know, him and a lot of other elite drivers don't really have much to lose, to be honest. I don't really think they've got too much pressure. I think Luke will probably do a fairly decent job in this race, and might even be able to take the victory. We do have 30 minutes to find out, of course, but it's mainly on Lucchesi. I think, honestly, Dennebrega just needs to keep it cool, keep it on the road, and, well, his championship could be in the bag by the end of today.
Yeah, we'll have to see if he can seal the deal in that championship. It's going to be a pretty it's going to be a pretty intense day of racing action from start to finish, and it's set to begin in just a couple of moments' time. That pace car has made the turn to come down pit lane miraculously, didn't hit any of the cones or the barrels at the end of the pit attenuator, waiting for these drivers to gun it. It's at the leader's discretion, but the green flag is out, and the drivers are on their way. You can see him fanning out very early on. Good start from King. He's going to be leading them off into turn number 1. Dennebrega starting to try and get some positions gained over his teammate of Luke Lucchesi, who's now dropped down to 5th. Look, that's a major contact, though. That's a big spin for Fairley. He's going to get collected there. Dean Powell, I think, was involved in that. That's going to be a big pileup heading through between 1 and 2. Looks like most of the field going to get away with that somewhat scot-free, but Dean Powell with nowhere to go. Oh, my.
Oh, that's such a shame from Dean. And I think Dean is having a go at Ryan Otins there in the voice chat. I didn't quite manage to see what happened between those two. Oh, there's another incident there as we just cut away, as Ryan Otins is currently in 3rd place. Had a bit of a poor start, but then managed to gain the places back as Lucchesi really getting close and personal with Ruben Behrings, nearly taking him out of the race. He's in a bit of a Behrings sandwich at the moment. Is Brecht going to potentially go for a move? Didn't have the cojones to go for it down there into turn 10. But yeah, what a chaotic start that was. We had about 3 or 4 separate big incidents, and Dean Powell, after one of his best qualifying sessions of the entire season, unfortunately it's just ended in a bit of disaster for him, and it's really paved the way for the rest of this race now. Huge gaps already opening up because of it, and about 3 or 4 separate packs already, and we're not even done with lap 1 yet.
Yeah, these drivers have not completed the first lap of that race. They are going to in just a couple of moments' time, however, going through the Ullman straightaway, one of the longest flat-out blasts on this entire lap, as I think there may have been incident a little bit farther in the back there. You can see smoke going up in the air. That's Stefan Donnelly, who's gone off the circuit. Getting back our attention to Luke King, leading this race as it stands at the moment in front of Denabrega, in front of Odins, in front of Ruben Behrings. Luke Lucchesi dropping down to 5th, rounding out your top 5 as it stands at the moment. Lots of drivers already making up some spots, mainly Liam Kelso running down in 25th. He's already made up 11 positions thus far in this race, as I think this replay may be glitched out on my end, Aaron.
Well, here's the replay of what happened into turn 1, and, well, Ryan did give Andrew a bit of a squeeze there, and then Andrew didn't really have anywhere else to go, and just caused a huge concertina effect behind, and, yeah, about 3 or 4 separate incidents caused all by this turn 1 incident, and, well, I'm a bit reluctant to give my own thoughts and opinions because apparently that's illegal nowadays, but that's what happened with Dean Powell as he got yeeted into the side by Andrew Fairley, and that just caused a huge mess for most of our field. And, well, like I said, Dean had a very strong qualifying session in that Mercedes, and yeah, all the way down the order for those 2 drivers, and yeah, just unfortunate for those guys.
An unfortunate start for those drivers, as I think this replay is once again glitched out from my perspective. Tough start for them. It's a track where you kind of have stuff like that happen, considering it's an old school track, not a whole lot of runoff area to speak of, so unfortunate to have some drivers have those incidents at the very beginning. One driver who's not had an incident is Luke King. He's still at the front of this field. Brecht Behrings leading in the Premier category. Ashley Brooks running very strong at the moment, as we're seeing some hard racing going on here, heading down that Ullman straightaway. That's Luke Lucchesi nearly running off into the hard shoulder, heading down that straightaway, nearly up against the wall, trying to get any sort of move done on Ruben Behrings to slip his way up into another position. As it stands at the moment, running in 5th, it's not a bad result to be sure, but with your championship rival and teammate and championship leader of Tristan Denabrega running in P2, you can't afford to finish 5th.
No, not really. Lucchesi definitely needs... can't even speak today. Lucchesi needs to start making some moves fairly quickly, as Van Gortel there getting very frustrated behind Brecht Behrings, who is... obviously, Luke thinks that he should be shown the red carpet and just be allowed to move past Behrings without any let or hindrance, but of course that's not how racing works. Unfortunately, Sunshine, you've got to make the move all by yourself. But here's Collis Shaw getting very loose. Oh, that's a huge incident with himself, and I believe that was Darren Sharples. That was a big one, and well, you've got to be thankful that we're just in a sim and not in real life, because that could have been a huge one. And the car in front of him, I believe that was Lee who was in front of him, who actually hit the wall on the outside as well. Collishaw tried to follow him, but didn't actually hit the wall. That Lamborghini just completely lost all grip. Might have gotten on a bump. I think it might have been. And huge incident. That's definitely put his race to an end, and Sharples. And that was a big one. And yeah, wow. Honestly, that's how you know it's a big incident, when you actually get worried for the driver's safety, even though this is just a sim.
As we see Marcel Brain back in the 102 car possibly come to a halt, maybe just slow on pit exit, waiting for the field to come past. This may be a sportsman roll from the driver running in 13th, as we just saw McLaren go off the track there. Now it looks like he just decided to tow back to pit lane. So not sure exactly what was going on there. But meanwhile, looking at a fight possibly developing here in the not too distant future, following Luke Van Gortel, the MJK Sim Racing 226 car, running in 7th at the moment. He may have a fight on his hands in the not too distant future. Luke Lucchesi certainly does. Running in 5th as it stands currently, trying to reel in Behrings. However, Behrings and Odins are now starting to battle for the final podium position overall, so he may slowly fall into the crutches and lose out some more positions, as we see nearly 3 wide action coming onto the start-finish straightaway, following Robin Brown running in 9th at the moment in the Evo category. Looks like he is still going to be side by side heading through turn number 1. This is some bold and audacious stuff between himself and the driver of the number 41 of Joseph Preston, heading down into the corner. may have one of these drivers back at it, and it's going to be Joe Preston backing out of that side-by-side fight with himself and Robin Noel Brown. Brown going to move his way up into 8th.
Yeah, some good battling there from those guys as we take a look at another replay of what happened to Darren Sharples. So this is momentarily after the entire front of his car got disintegrated, and unsurprisingly, he had no ability to turn. So he just ended up slamming into the wall at turn 1, and that's going to be the last we're going to see of Darren for this race at least. And as we follow Robin Noel Brown once again on the back of a couple cars in front of him, he's got Martin Koch directly in front of him, and then another AM driver just a few clicks up the road. It's James Pallow, who's actually had a decent outing here so far. Not really seen too much of James so far this season, so having a decent race here at Sebring, as Ryan Oaten's going wheel to wheel with Lou Chessie as we head into the final few corners. I think Ryan just struggling for that outside grip as Lou Chessie going very deep into that final corner, somehow managing to keep the position, but it puts Ryan in a really, really awkward spot as he's having to defend from Van Gortel and Brecht Bearings. As we head into turn 1, Ryan should have the inside line and should be fine, and Van Gortel might actually use this opportunity to get past Brecht Bearings, as he's been trying to do that for lap after lap now. But still, nothing Luke Van Gortel can do there, and will just have to sit behind Brecht for at least another lap or two. But also Ryan has lost 2 places now in just a few laps. He lost 3rd to Ruben Bearings and has now lost out to Lou Chessie as well, as the South African definitely making the progress that he needs. His championship rival only 2 places up the road now, but about, I think, 5 seconds between Dennebrega and Lou Chessie. So he's got a bit of work to do, as something there happened to Brecht Bearings. I think he might have gone deep at the hairpin. Oh, there's someone behind. Turf Crew has had an incident. Something big has happened behind. I'm guessing that's all happened down at the hairpin. And, well, we're going to have to take a quick look at what actually happened as Gattuso coming into the hairpin. Oh dear, the car's behind, already going wheel to wheel. Was that Ashley Brooks potentially? I think it was who was involved in that. But I think that was Turf Crew trying to go for a move there. And yes, it was a bit... He was close, but it was a bit of a dive. And unfortunately, that took himself out of the race, actually. He's completely mullered the front left suspension on his Porsche and nearly took out Ashley Brooks and Stefan Gattuso with him as well, as this is Tom Weston trying to battle with Danny Lee, getting very close to one another. The Mercedes swooping around the outside and managing to get that 7th place. That was very impressive racecraft there from Danny Lee, but it's still not over. He's going to have to defend into turn 1 as Chris Jennings losing out to Matt Hoyland there for 6th place. And it's all happening here on lap 6 here at Sebring, as that's another car going very slow on the inside. Is that someone coming into the pit? Oh, that's Francois Brandet. Oh my god. Ooh, even more. That's going to be huge for the Evo Championship.
Yeah, that is going to be a big one. Not sure why the DXT Magenta number 28 Porsche driver is coming down pit lane. Not going to go up on the jacks, I don't think. Maybe this is some sort of penalty. I'm taking a look to see if there is any sort of outstanding black flag for him. I'm not sure if there is, but he's still stopped there. Maybe, Aaron, this could be a theory, he maybe underfueled his car because he's out and away. 19.7 seconds stopped in his pit stall.
That would have been a big underfuel.
He may have put qualifying fuel in it. That would be a massive underfuel to be sure. But at the same time, 11 minutes in, that's about as long as 4 laps takes around here, including an out lap. So I think Francois Brandet may have put qualifying fuel in that car. So a tough break for Brandet.
Yeah, that is very weird. I was wondering if it was maybe a repair, but these guys do have a fast repair, as Paolo getting very, very close there to Robin Noel Brown as they fight it out for 5th place now after all of these incidents. I think they were fighting for 8th at one point, but after everything that's happened, it's just promoted them up a huge amount of places, as Dean Powell and Joe Sparrow now going wheel to wheel as Dean, of course, would have had such a strong start to this race, but had such an awkward turn one incident as Joe is not giving Dean any sort of space on the outside there. I mean, these guys may as well fight. They've got a couple of cars about 15 seconds ahead of them, so it's very unlikely they're going to get involved in any other battles today. But, you know, they may as well have a little battle for the next about 18 minutes, and, well, Joe clearly wants to keep a hold of this position, as I would imagine Dean, judging by the pace he had in practice and qualifying, is probably going to make his way past as we head into the sunset bend of turn 17, as he's gaining. Is he going to go for the move up the inside? Briefly looked, gets very close as Joe goes a bit deep into the final corner. Is that going to allow Dean to shoot on past? The outside line into turn 1 doesn't really work, to be honest. Not really in any car. It's very difficult to hold it round there, and I can imagine it's going to be a similar story. And yes, it is. Unless Joe goes very wide, which he has done, is this going to allow Dean to come back at him? It does briefly, but Joe's being very aggressive on the defense, not allowing Dean to have any kind of inside line, as the outside lines here at Sebring are very, very weak. The inside here is so strong just because of the nature of the track and how flat it is. The inside line is always going to be the strongest way, and Joe knows that. He's defending like a madman as Dean tries, he might round the outside at the hairpin. This is probably his best chance, getting a nice exit there round the outside. And I was saying how difficult it is, but he's just got it done there. And, well, he probably should defend the inside now, as he is doing into turn 10. And I think after this, there's not going to be much Joe can do, as they are still going wheel to wheel. But Joe finally has to back out of it and concede the place as we head into Tower Corner. And finally, Dean Powell has gotten past Joe Sparrow. That took a bit of effort, but he got there in the end.
Joe Sparrow may be seeing the red mist. I mean, he's got a red Mercedes in front of him, so I guess that's close enough, but that was a very hard-fought fight between both of those drivers. Give us a very intense lap and a half of racing action as we see some side-by-side fighting in the Evo category. That's Gareth Noon in contact with himself, and Keenan backs it into the barrier. Hopefully he did not get clipped by any more cars, but that's a big crash heading through into Sunset Bend. Chris Keenan, that car is ready for the junkyard. Maybe find a replay here in the not too distant future. Yeah, you can see that car is wrecked. Gonna get that replay loaded up to see this contact heading down into turn 17.
Yeah, that was very awkward. I mean, Chris did get very wide. Well, there's not really much the Lamborghini could have done there, and that is unfortunate for those two to end up in an incident like that, as Chris Keenan just about makes it into his pit box. To be honest, I'm actually surprised he was able to make it back, considering how badly damaged that rear suspension looked. And he does have a fast repair. Chose not to use it there for some reason and is still being held in his pit box. Very strange. What's even stranger, as you can see in the background, there's a Porsche going wide. I'm not quite sure who that was, who just decided to do some lawn mowing at the hairpin, but they've managed to rejoin the track. It's the car behind Joe Preston, which is Martin Koch, who went a little bit wide there at the turn 7 hairpin. I don't think he lost any places, just a bit of a bruised ego down there, probably a bit too late on the brakes. We've seen this a couple times today already, and well, I can imagine the Dutchman did exactly the same thing. That is far too late, Martin. You do not have the brakes of a Formula 1 car, my friend. That is far too late. Probably got distracted trying to adjust some settings in the car or something, but my God, I don't know what brakes he thinks he has, but yeah, just broke, I think, at the second cone. That was extremely late.
Testing the limits, shall we say. Dropping the anchors would have probably been the only way to pull up to that corner in time, but nevertheless getting back to the racing action and take a look at Ruben Behrings leading this small little train that he finds himself at the front of at the moment. Luke Lucchesi running right behind in fourth. Luke Van Gortel a little bit farther in the back, a shot about 0.8 of a second between Lucchesi and Gortel for those final two positions inside of the top 5. Ryan Odin's kind of involved in that as well. There you can see Odin's in that Alpha 1 esports car running just barely in this fight, to say the very least, about 1.2 seconds back of Luke Van Gortel. So we can really just say it's 3 cars involved in a battle for the final podium spot. Lots up for grabs for those drivers. Drivers like Van Gortel, for instance, he's not really thinking of championship aspirations. He's just going after all that glory. Lucchesi, meanwhile, he's in the complete opposite boat. He's thinking about championships as well. I gotta say, Ruben Bearings, he may be thinking about that as well. You know, he enters this race 4th in the elite standings at 458 points. Not terribly far away from a driver like John Brainback, for instance. It's only about 35 points between those two drivers in the final top 5 positions in the point standings. So if you are a driver like Ruben Bearings, you want to hold on to that 4th place spot. So having a run like this where you're going to try and bring it home in 3rd, as long as he can hang on between now and the checkered flag, with this race coming to a close in about 12 minutes time. But that would still be a really good result for the Belgian behind the wheel of the 251 car.
Yeah, it was, and he has really stepped up the consistency over these past few rounds, and hasn't finished below 5th in his class since about round 8, since race 8, but he's just been really good this second half of the season. And, well, if only he'd been like that the entire season, maybe we could have a couple other cars also in this championship fight. But at the moment, it's still, of course, just Dennebrega and Lucchesi. And it's probably going to stay between Dennebrega and Lucchesi for these final few races. As maybe, hopefully, next season we will be able to get some closer racing, as that's Malcolm Coates looking for a move on Stefan Gattuso, potentially. Malcolm is actually doing pretty damn well today, considering that he has been struggling a lot this season to get to grips with this Corvette. He's doing very well here at Sebring. He's currently in 3rd in the Premier class, and right behind Stefan Gattuso, who's currently in 12th. So if Malcolm can somehow get this place on the Italian, he'll be starting on pole for the next race, which he definitely would like to see. And I imagine all the Americans watching this, especially here at Sebring, would definitely love to see that.
USA! Okay, we gotta be impartial here on Apex Racing TV, but it's nice to see the Corvette running strong, you know? Despite the fact that it was one of the most, it was a car with that was met with a lot of excitement when it was announced that iRacing was going to add it into the iRacing platform. It hasn't really seen too much use though, which I think is a little bit of a shame. Let's listen to the engine note of this thing. Gotta say, I think in terms of the 2 American GT3 cars we've had added onto iRacing this past calendar year, gotta say the Mustang is probably the better of the engine sounds. Of course, the Mustang kind of drives like a, kind of think of the right phrase to describe it, kind of drives like a bottle cap being thrown into a river, so it's not really the best handling race car, to say the very least, but the Corvette is certainly a good handler. It was compared to a Ferrari when this new generation of Corvette was introduced, and now we got a Corvette and Ferrari going side by side heading down into Sunset Bend. Looks like Coates is going to back out of it for the time being, however, maybe trying to charge up a run coming out of this corner onto that start-finish straightaway to slip his way up into 12th overall. This would be a brilliant result for the American behind the wheel of the number 121 car. Has not had a very smooth season, but not close enough to get that move done on the Italian Gattuso hang down into turn number 1, but making a little bit of contact.
Yeah, that was a squeaky bum time.
Have we lost Aaron? Hello, Earth to Aaron. I think we may have just lost Aaron there. Hopefully we'll be able to get him back soon.
Am I live?
Sorry about that. Oh, there we go. I think I think you may have accidentally unplugged your microphone and all that segment there, Aaron. Your voice just cut out from us.
Well, I did hit my cord, but I didn't think it did anything. But well, I do apologise. I didn't mean to beat my microphone in anger. I was just trying to adjust it, and apparently it unplugged. So yeah, my apologies. But what I was going to say is squeaky bum time there for Malcolm Coates. That's not what you want to be doing through turn 1 at all. and has lost a little bit of ground to Stefan Gattuso, and hopefully he'll make that back up. As what has happened here, very big chunk of cars all clustered at the hairpin as Martin Koch now going wheel to wheel with Danny Lee. Nearly forgot the driver there. Danny Lee going for a move on Ryan Otins. Steve Powell, my apologies. I mean, they have the same livery, same car. You know, it's very easy to mix them up. As Martin, do not do that heading through turn 12. As a lot of guys really struggling for the grip in these tyres over these last few laps. They're all sliding all over the place. This is what happens to Martin. And did he make a similar mistake at the hairpin as well? That looks a bit late for Martin there, and didn't quite cut some grass, nearly did, but just went a bit deep and lost out there to a few cars. I think all of the cars that he did lose out to, most of them were lapped cars, so I think he'll get away with that one.
It looks like he gets away with it fairly scot-free as we go back to live action. Look at this side-by-side fight heading down into turn number 1. That's Hussein Serk de Slesser in that Suma GP2 Lamborghini, running in the 5th position as it stands at the moment in the Premier category. As it stands overall, though, the driver in that Lamborghini running in 16th was going side-by-side with Matt Hoyland. That was going to be a fight for both overall position and class position as well. However, it looks like they stayed line astern with Hoyland in 4th and Serk de Slesser in the 5th position. Running effectively in no man's land as it stands at the moment. Have to go about 2 seconds back to Victor Van Ziest, running in the 6th position at the moment. But these drivers feeling a little bit opportunistic, going for some moves in some sections that you wouldn't usually expect. Turn 1, though, that's a move that we have seen done in the past. However, even in a section like that, Aaron, just based off the bumps that we have around this place, going for a move like that into turn number 1, still a little bit marginal as we take a look at a replay that I can see.
Well, here's James Paolo, who looks like he's just used the curbs a little bit too aggressively coming out of turn 5, and does actually hit the wall. I thought he was going to avoid it there, but unfortunately did not, and Love tapped the outside barrier there, and probably has a little bit of front end damage, as well as Danny Lee going wheel to wheel with Brett Bearings. This Tom Weston, my apologies, as Weston going for a spin. And that is not what you want to be doing at all through the final corner there. And that inside line just hit one of the bumps, spun the car around. And I don't think there was any contact between those two. Looked like fairly clean racing from what I could tell. So we can take a look at a replay to see if there was any net code. They were fairly close, but you can see Tom looking a little bit twitchy already. And yeah, that was just all by himself. And well, that Porsche definitely looking a bit of a handful. And well, here at Sebring with the track temps off the scale, I can imagine those tyres are probably overheating like mad.
That's a very good point that you bring up there, Aaron, in reference to the track temperatures. Ambient temperatures still around about the same as they were in that qualifying session, just a couple degrees hotter. The track temperatures, meanwhile, 108 degrees Fahrenheit, so it is scorching here in Sebring today. These drivers feeling the burn literally and metaphorically as they try and wheel these race cars to the best of their abilities. Gotta say, despite some drivers in Porsches maybe running into some difficulties, Luke King in the Alpha 1 Esports Porsche has put together a very good drive. He's running in the lead at the moment, 4 seconds in front of the second place runner as it stands currently, which is still Trishan Denabrega. Those two running exactly where they started in this race. Lucchesi finally gaining enough spots to actually get to the point where he was at the very start. But as I say that, I think he and Luke Van Gortel may have just gone side by side a couple of moments ago, with Lucchesi slipping his way up into the 3rd place position. Looking at the beautiful sights and sounds of Sebring International Raceway. You can see that airport, which is still operational. I remember flying in there in, I forget what it was, in a plane in Microsoft Flight Simulators. I think we may have gone down a bad rabbit hole there. That may have explained the other oh no from you there, Aaron. Not a fan of the other flight sim stories, or was there something that happened on track?
No, it was Ruben, unfortunately. I thought something happened to him. But I went to check my live timing and I was like, oh, he's fine. He's still in 3rd. And then you mentioned that Lucchesi got into 3rd, and I was like, hang on. Ruben was in 3rd. What on earth happened? And, well, they were going side by side. And maybe there was a bit of contact between these two as we head now into the Le Mans section. And yeah, just disappears from existence. And that's really unfortunate. That could have been a spectacular battle between those two. But, well, I mean, I don't think Lucchesi's going to be complaining at all. It's a free place for him that he didn't have to fight for. And just brings him one step closer to his teammate. But, I mean, of course, he is still behind his teammate, which is not what he wants. As Malcolm Coates now still on the back of Gattuso. This is still... Actually, never mind. I was going to say this is still an important fight, but with Ruben gone, I don't think Malcolm cares anymore because he's in 12th. So if it stays like this, Malcolm Coates is going to be on pole for the next race. But he has got Rob McKee right behind him, who potentially wants that pole position 12th place spot. And, well, unfortunate what happened to Ruben. That's a real shame. Would have been such a good battle, and he's had such a good race as well. And the consistency that we were talking about has come to an end for the Belgian. Not his fault, of course, but just a bit disappointing. As Dennis Collar, something's happened to him. He's currently in the pit, as is Liam Kelso. I wonder if some people maybe have had some fuel mix-ups, or maybe some people just... I don't know, it's very weird. A lot of drivers having long pit stops, which I don't quite understand because they have fast repairs. I haven't seen anyone take tyres. That looked like fuel. That was very, very quick. But some of these guys have been fueling for like 20 odd seconds. And I just don't understand how you can get fuel that wrong. So I think it is something else, but I just don't know what.
Yeah, well, stuff happens from time to time, Aaron. I think I would just leave it at that as we see Liam Kelso exit the pits. The Scottish driver behind the wheel of the number 59 car was a hard charger earlier on. He had made up 11 spots in the first couple of moments of this race. However, as a result of that run through the pits, now down in 35th, just one position gained since the drop of the green flag about 29 minutes ago. I believe we are on the white flag, or at least coming up to it. It's going to be a pretty dominant win, for lack of a better term, for King. So that's going to be pretty set in stone for him. I think he only has a couple of corners left to go. Actually, I say a couple of corners left to go. He can make that around about a handful as he heads his way through Collier Bend for the last time in this race. That's another corner that I always find to be so difficult in these races. And even just doing hot lapping around this track as well. Collier Bend, such a pain in the butt to try and get right. Slowly getting on that gas pedal, heading through the corner. Try not to spin up the rears. Of course, not really too much of a problem in a GT3 race car with traction control, but still a pretty tough ride to be sure. King, though, heading his way through Le Mans, turn number 16 for the final time in this race. It's going to be a really good show for him, and it's going to be another good show for Denna Brega. He doesn't need to go out for all-out glory and snag victories in the final few races of this season, but just finishing in front of your teammate and making sure that gap doesn't shrink down catastrophically. That's what he needs to do at the end of the season. It looks like he's going to try and do that in the first race here tonight, but Luke King, the South African, in that Alpha 1 Esports Porsche, going to go on to that start-finish straightaway to take the checkered flag. The winner for this first race at Sebring here tonight. Denna Brega now crossing the start-finish line to finish in P2. Luke Lucchesi going to round out your podium in third, and that's exactly what Denna Brega wanted out of this race. That's not what Luke Lucchesi probably had in mind. Luke Van Gortel, flashing his headlights, seemed to be happy with a fourth-place run. So the Porsches, despite the fact that a lot of the drivers who've run into some difficulties seem to be in Porsches, looks like those Porsches are actually pretty quick as well, as in the Premier category, Brecht Bering's going to win it out in that class, and waiting a little bit to see Malcolm Coates cross that start-finish line to finish in 11th. He finished in 11th when everything was said and done, so Stefano Gattuso actually going to inherit that reverse grid pole, but still Coates in that Corvette going to be on the front row come time for the second race that we're having to start up in a couple of minutes time, but still King with a very impressive drive, Denna Brega with the exact kind of drive that he had in mind.
Yeah, Denna Brega, all he needs to do is just finish ahead of his teammate, and he'll give us a cheeky thumbs up. That's all he needs to do for the rest of this season. And, well, even if he finishes 1 or 2 places behind Lucchesi, it's still a big enough points gap that he can afford to do that now. So he's going to be very happy with this first race, but of course it's going to be about that second race, the most difficult part, coming through the field once again. And well, the second race is always the craziest, where the big drivers might struggle to get past some of the slower guys. And of course, some shock results like Malcolm Coates having a very, very good finish there in third in Premier and starting on the front row of the grid. That's going to be huge for Malcolm Coates as they get a little bit of a 5-minute break to consider their life choices. Take a break, the usual, go to the toilet, have a drink, have a biscuit, or as you guys in America call it, what I forgot what it's called now, like a cookie, even though it's a biscuit, but whatever. You guys are weird. But yeah, Malcolm Coates should probably be very happy with that result.
I could best describe an American biscuit as oil dry clumped up together. That's the best way I can describe it. I have some very odd memories of going to school and having to eat some of the school lunches that we had, and them giving us biscuits which were either hard as a rock or just like so floury in a way that not floury in like the you grow them in your garden way, but like the actual baking ingredient flour. Yeah. You take one bite of it and it feels like all of the moisture just gets like pulled away. It is the oddest feeling. I guess those would be technically called scones in the UK. I'm gonna have to
they're
look
called
through
scones.
this. Yeah, let me look this up here real quick. American biscuits in UK terminology.
It's just the fact that you guys use it as like a breakfast thing. Like you guys will have like eggs and bacon and sausages, and in my mind that's just horrible. Like what? Like in my eyes, a scone or a biscuit, wherever you're from, it is something you have like with jam or butter or some cream cheese or something, not eggs and all this other stuff. It just doesn't make sense. I don't get it, but you Americans do some very strange things.
I mean, in fairness, I feel like most of the people who do have a breakfast like that usually have it with a side of OJ, as we could say, orange juice. Really pulling out the other terminologies with here, and very fitting that we mentioned orange juice as we're seeing a race down in Florida. But one of the oddest things, I say odd, I've had it before and it's actually pretty good, is a breakfast sandwich with a scone. So we'll just apply the British terminology here. So it's like bacon, egg, and cheese on a scone. And it's very, just that sort of thing. I remember having that once. Very buttery, very tasty, very, very good. That could be part of the reason why I'm a bit in terms of size. But no, it's that's I guess the UK sort of mindset when it comes to food and the American mindset when it comes to food, a little bit different. Not sure if I could say this. There are certain points of times where I question what I can and cannot say on broadcast, but I've heard this joke before. Certain British culinary dishes still seem like there's an ongoing war.
But I don't understand what, though. Like, I was having a discussion the other day with an American, and, like, I was like, I've got some eggs on toast. It's just, a very simple, very good dinner. And then, obviously, we got into the argument about beans on toast and why beans don't belong on toast when they clearly do. So, I don't understand why Americans don't like this idea, because every single American I know who has given stick to beans or eggs on toast or whatever, and then tried it, they've been like, okay, I understand now. I don't understand why that's such a big thing in America that you guys hate beans on toast. It's so good. It's so simple. Just get some toast, get some Heinz baked beans, you throw it together, and boom, dinner. It's nice, it's good, it's nutritional mostly, unless you have a lot of beans, in which case the entire night you're going to be, but it's just a good dinner. There's nothing wrong with it.
So I guess as long as you are not risking the chance of the brown rain, it's a pretty good meal to say the very life. I gotta say, honestly, Aaron, most Americans would probably be in a position where they can kind of judge in this regard. I have never had beans, period, so I cannot judge or make any sort of judgment. I know, it's very odd, and like the Heinz Corporation is based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I mean, granted, to get from one side of PA to another, it's like a 6-hour drive, but that would still, I mean, maybe I'll have to consider it at some point. Usually when it comes to me having toast, just put a little bit of butter on it. That's about all. Get some butter from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, from the Holsteins that we the Holstein cows that we stole from the Canadians. But that's usually the way I go when it comes to breakfast. That or just like getting a breakfast sandwich. I'm close enough to New York, and Philadelphia is just basically like New York's little brother, whereby bagels are still kind of like a big thing that we got around here. Bagel sandwiches, bacon, egg, and cheese. Right, I'm now making myself hungry. This is single-handedly made my stomach begin to growl, so I think the iRacing gods have saved us from the fact that we can get that starting grid loaded up for you in just a couple of moments' time from the second race here at Sebring. It's going to be Stefano Gattuso, the Italian behind the wheel of the number 239 ADX Racing esports car, going to be starting from the pole. Malcolm Coates going to join him on the front row. Then we have Alex Fretwell starting this race in third, Tom Weston alongside in fourth, Ashley Brooks with a very good performance in that first race. He'll be starting this race from fifth, the pole in the Evo category. Brecht Bering's going to join him on that third row. Brecht pretty much going to try and lock up the championship with this result. We don't have the math in our head, but you can pretty much just guarantee that he would have an insurmountable gap leaving this race if he sneaks away with another Premier Class win. Starting this race in seventh is going to be Daniel Lee. Ryan Odin's going to join him on that fourth row. Running out your top 10, going to be Luke Van Gortel and Luke Lucchesi. Trishan Denabrega and Luke King, they finished second and first respectively. They're going to start this race 11th and 12th. Respectively. Matt Hoyland started right behind in 13th. Rob McKee, who finished second of the Evo drivers, going to be starting this race from the 14th spot. Hussein Serk de Slesser going to be starting in 15th. Victor Van Ziest in 16th. And looking through the rest of the drivers that we have inside of the top 24, we have Chris Shannon starting in 17th. Robin O'Brien in P18. Scott Kostrick in 19th. John Brainback rounding out your top 20, Stephen Donnelly in 21st, Dean Powell in 22nd, Gareth Noon in 23rd, and Joe Preston rounding out your top 24.
And in 25th is going to be James Pallow, 26th Danny Weir, 27th Joe Sparrow, 28th Martin Cock, 29th Jeffrey Darman, 30th place is Francois Brandet. His race really did not get off to a good start. He's got some work to do. 31st is Paul Collis-Shaw, 32nd Andrew Fairley, 33rd is going to be thank you Joshy, James Horworth in 33rd. Roll Turfcrew in 34th, Liam Kelso in 35th, Chris Keenan in 36th, Christopher Radolph in 37th, Brayton Back in 38th, Ruben Behrens in 39th. He really is going to be one to watch this race. 40th is Dennis Collar, and then your last six drivers of Thomas Pugh, Darren Sharples, John Ludbrook, Corey Price, Robin Astin, and Sean Clark, all the way down there in 46th place.
So that's going to round out your just absolutely massive grid that we have from this race. And for the second time in a row, going to get just about all of them taken care of by the time they head their way into the hairpin of turn number 7. An overtaking opportunity that we didn't see too many drivers use in that first race, Aaron. I don't know about you, that kind of surprised me a little bit. What do you think?
Say again? Sorry.
all good, man. I know it was very quick. I'm sure you're probably taking a sip of water as I was asking that. A little bit surprised that we didn't see too many drivers go for a move off into turn number 7 during that first race. So heading into the second one, do you think people are going to try and use that spot a little bit more?
Probably. I think on the first lap, it's not going to be as mental as we got in that first race. So I think we'll see a lot more moves into that hairpin. For good or for worse, we'll find out in about a minute's time. But I think as a whole, the field should be closer. I mean, hopefully we don't get another big pile-up. But you never know. With iRacing, magical things can happen. Someone could get big netcode and then we're all in for a world of trouble, aren't we? But let's hope that doesn't happen. And we get some good, clean racing and maybe some shock results. Who knows? Maybe Malcolm Coates can keep a hold of maybe a top 5 place or maybe even get a podium. Who knows? He looked very, very strong in that first race, finishing in 11th place. Maybe that Corvette doing a little bit better around here than some of us would have thought. I do agree with your take earlier, though, that the Corvette does sound a bit, yeah. I mean, to be fair, I'm not that big a fan of flat plane V8 engines, really. I just don't think they sound very nice, especially if they're twin turboed, or just turboed in general. They just sound like Hoovers. That's what most McLarens have sounded like, and that's what the Corvette, unfortunately, sounds like. I weirdly prefer the V6 in the 296, but that's just my opinion.
I think if we had to build like the perfect iRacing car, it would have the handling of the Mercedes W12. It would have the engine noise of the Cadillac. I'm not sure what the looks would look like, but anyways, ready to get things up and rolling for the second race of the night. Waiting for that green flag to come at. The start procedure has occasionally been some of these drivers, Malcolm Coates, nearly making contact with our poleman of Stefano Gattuso, but the green flag is out, and the drivers are on their way. That was very strange, heading down that start-finish straightaway, but I'll zip it as they head into turn number 1. Pretty bad start from Coates. He is going to be dropping down to third early on and running very wide through turn number 1. I think the ill-handling nature of that Corvette at times, especially compared to some of the European counterparts, I will concede that point. Aaron, the 121 car, beginning to drop back as a field. Most of these drivers finding themselves in the midst of a hornet's nest, heading their way. That's Coates going off the track yet again. That's heading through turn number 5 as we see some drivers go off the track and around. That, I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, is Martin Koch.
Yeah, it is. He's made a bit of a boo-boo there at turn 3. As we've got a bit of another pile up here, just coming out of turn 5, excuse me, as that's John Ludbrook and a couple of other cars involved as well. And, well, I mean, Ron, you said at the start of this that Gattuso, you know, got a race win, surprisingly, in a second race during these two 30-minute races, and you said he might be a bit of a dark horse today, and maybe that could have been one of the best predictions of all time, as he's currently leading by a decent margin, and that is one of the McLarens there with huge damage. Two of the McLarens there with big damage. I'm not quite sure what's happened there. I mean, maybe the front bumper on the McLaren is just very sensitive. I don't know, but two McLarens missing their front bumpers, getting very hairy down into Tower Corner. And one of those cars is Jeffrey Darman, who's missing the complete front end of his McLaren. Is that potentially Chris Keenan, who's the other car? I think it is, who's missing his front bumper as well. So those two guys obviously might have had a coming together at some points, and Chris Keenan is still going, but I can imagine the drag coefficient of that car is a lot worse than it was. And there was a Ferrari there without a rear wing.
Yeah, I think I will possibly leave it at that, as we see Gattuso leading this race over Alex Fretwell in P. Actually, I say that my live timing stream may be a little bit short-circuited at the moment. It's actually Weston running in P2. Getting some drivers going off the track. That's Hoyland running wide coming out of turn number 1 in that 123 car, trying to find any sort of challenge to Brecht Bearings. He's running second at the most. We see some 3-wide action heading down into turn number 3. They keep it clean, surprisingly so. Certainly not discrediting the talent behind these drivers. Stephen Donnelly, though, taking some nice evasive action to avoid any sort of major drama, heading through turn number 3, 4, and 5, which is such a quick section to try and go through. Not quick in terms of pace, quick in terms of the sense where it feels like one corner just follows another right after another. It feels like you have no room to rest heading through there. You just gotta lick the stamp and absolutely send it in some of these race cars, as we see battling up and down this grid. That's Andrew Fairley feeling really racy at this point in time, having a side-by-side fight between himself and the 55 car. That right there, that's an off-track moment, I believe, for Scott Kostrick there in the 101 car, as we saw the side-by-side action involving Danny Weir in the 55 car. Some more action continuing here. Lots of McLarens, lots of Lamborghinis running in the midst of this pack, riding on board with Garrett Noon in the 24 car.
Yes, it was a lot cleaner of a start than it was in the first race, but still wasn't absolutely perfect all round. And we can take a look at some of the incidents that did happen on that first lap, as this is Dennis Collar, who probably got quite a good view of everything that happened ahead of him, as that's Martin Koch, who was the car we saw spun round, and then I think something else happened coming through this next corner. That's the complete tear off of a Ferrari's rear wing. I'm not quite sure who that was. It might have been Ryan Osins, as that's Brandet got spun round, hitting the back of Martin Koch, and then Martin got spun round by one of the McLaren, and it all just, it was similar. Oh yeah, Martin had to be careful there coming back on the track. And we're going to get an overhead so we can maybe see potentially what happened just around him. So Francois went into the back of him, then everyone checked up here, and that just caused a huge concertina effect. Further behind, it's about 3 or 4 cars making separate incidents there. And literally about 2 corners later, we had some more crashes as well. As said, that Marcel Breitenbach maybe got a bit of a good view of this. That's Brandet who went for that spin. And then Breitenbach just had to go off the track to avoid about 2 or 3 cars who were just stranded at the side of the road. And yeah, that's, I think that is Ryan Oten's rear wing, just in the middle of the track. And Sharples, here's another view. But of course, with iRacing potentially adding on-track debris, oh, that's going to spice things up. Good thing we haven't got it yet, as well, some cars probably would have already picked up punctures or even damage. So they've gotten away with it for now, as Gattuso coming under a bit of pressure from one of the cars behind. I believe this is Alex Fretwell.
Yeah, it's looking like we may have some fights on our hands. This is going to be very, very close. Gotta say, when I was originally looking through, I did not realize the fact that Alex Fretwell, a premier driver, was running in P2. I thought it was a graphical error in terms of my live timing screen, but no, Fretwell putting on a really good show at this point in time. The driver of the 152 Lamborghini running in first in the Premier class at the moment, as that's an off-track moment for Stephen Donnelly, the Irishman in the 130 car. He is going off the circuit. That was heading through turn number 16 of Le Mans with a little bit of wall contact, trying to get that car spun around. James Holworth also slow in the number 54 BMW. Gonna take a look at this replay here.
Yes, Stephen trying to go up the inside there at Le Mans corner. And, well, not really an overtaking opportunity at turn 16. And ended as well, about as well as you'd think. And, oh, dearie me, is that Alex Fretwell, who has just caused a huge incident coming out of turn 1. And, oh, my word, we just cut to the end of that. I think Turfkura might have been involved. Liam Kelso there, you can see, has got big damage. What on earth happened to Alex Fretwell, who was potentially looking at the lead of the entire race, has now pretty much ended his race. I'd also like to mention something happened to Dana Braga. It wasn't Fretwell. My apologies, just a car that looked incredibly like Fretwell. Apologies. I'm not sure which Lamborghini that was then who made that contact, but either way, that was a huge incident. But yeah, something happened to Dana Braga. I'm not quite sure, but he's all the way down in, I think, like 40th place. So, well, we thought that he had one hand on the trophy. Maybe not. As into turn 1 we go. This is on board with Turfkura. And, oh, that's a big whack. It looks like James Pallo, who was the car who, in the Lamborghini, who got spun round. And that's big damage for Turfkura. His race is definitely over. Was it contact with James Pallo, or is it just Lamborghini thinks that was definitely contact? Looks like Liam Kelso, Scott Kostrick, my apologies, who was on the outside. A lot to try and keep up with here, as there's a lot of separate incidents. But yeah, it's Scott Kostrick on the outside, bit of iRacing glue there, and yeah, James just got shot back into traffic and ended up taking out Royal Turfkura with him. And hopefully we don't have any more incidents that we've missed, as there's already a lot in these opening 5 laps. But I think we can finally get back to some proper racing.
Settling into a groove with a fight that we may have on our hands involving Gattuso and Lee. According to the live timing tower at the moment, they're covered by barely any air at this point in time as we see some drivers come down pit lane. That's Kostrick in the 101 McLaren. Now looking at this fight involving Gattuso. I'm not sure that is Lee, right? Actually, that is Lee a little bit farther in the back. A shot. It's Fretwell who is pretty much bumper to bumper with Gattuso coming out of the hairpin, heading down now into Cunningham of turn number 10, making a little bit of contact there. That had to have been either very close, millimeters separating those two race cars, or it was contact between the two of them. Gonna zip it up as we see Lee slowly reeling these two in. Daniel Lee has been an incredibly impressive driver to follow ever since he made his series debut at Barcelona towards the beginning of this season. The driver of the 271 Mercedes, he's shown some winning potential and he's shown some winning speed as well, but hasn't got that car to victory lane yet. Keyword being yet, though, because I think only 9 minutes and 45 seconds into this 30-man long race, Daniel Lee may find himself with a really good opportunity here at Sebring.
Yeah, he's in probably one of the best positions he's ever been this season to win a race. And, well, he's definitely been one of the better drivers this season. But, again, just the car choice maybe letting him down slightly, as that's Fretwell going a bit deep into the final corner. Might give Lee the chance to get into that second place. And it might give the opportunity to Van Gortel as well, potentially, to make their way onto the front row. As Danny Lee trying to go up the inside, it's very close. You can see him stabbing at the wheel there to try and keep it on the road, but just could not get it done as Van Gortel was flashing. I think he was trying to flash Fretwell there. Van Gortel, I think, is very much of the opinion that if you're not in the class, get out of the way, which I guess with the way that the point system works in this series, it does kind of make sense that fighting other cars outside of your class doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. As Robin Brown going a bit wide at turn 1. Liam Kelso still carrying a lot of damage on his Ferrari. And, well, at least the Ferrari and the McLaren are very similar in the fact that they have very sensitive front bumpers, as Fretwell trying to go for the move of the race into first place. Can he get it done? He's very, very close to getting it pulled off. But here is Danny Lee making sure that any opportunities that come up, he will take them, as there's a bit of contact between the Italian and Fretwell. And unfortunately, the Lamborghini just did not have the outside grip. Now here comes Danny Lee, surely with the benefit of the inside line into these next few corners. He might be able to sneak himself up into second place. He's just got to be brave, keep it around the outside for this corner, then the inside of this next corner. And he has just about gotten ahead, but didn't get a great exit, having kept himself on that inside line. It's just going to be a drag race now all the way down here. Is Van Gortel going to make it 3 wide? He's giving Danny Lee a bit of a bump draft. Probably the smart thing to do to try and get the elite drivers past Fretwell. And Danny Lee looks to be ahead of Fretwell finally. Danny Lee up into second place. He's just got to keep a hold of it now. And Van Gortel flashing Fretwell like crazy, as the Dutchman is probably going to try and make his way past into turn 1. He's just got to be brave and try not to hit the cars in front of him. He's pulled alongside. This battle's been going on for pretty much an entire lap, but still nothing Van Gortel could do there, and has to sit behind the Lamborghini for probably another lap at this rate.
Yes, they're going to have to wait a little bit until we can try and challenge him yet again. One driver certainly going to be giving a challenge to Stefano Gattuso is going to be Danny Lee. They're going to be side by side, heading down that flat out blast into turn number 7. Lee on the inside, Gattuso on the outside. They're going to be side by side, heading through the corner. One's in a Ferrari, the other is in the Mercedes. And it looks like the Mercedes is going to try and use that V8 power to pull in front of the 239 car, and he gets it done. Daniel Lee slipping into the lead of this race with 13 minutes now on the clock. May have some side-by-side racing, though, heading into Cunningham, nearly making contact yet again. These drivers have been very bold all throughout this race, and we nearly saw them come to blows. Heading into the corner, Stefano Gattuso nearly getting a checkup from Alex Fretwell, heading now in through Tower Bend of turn number 13. It's now very much a 4-horse race. You've got Lee, Gattuso, Van Gortel involved in this. You also got Fretwell, and I believe, I'm trying to see what else car may be involved in that. That, I believe, may actually be Roll Turfgroyer, so he's a lap down. So the Evo competitor not involved in that battle, but he's still got 5 cars involved in it. And I think Turfgroyer is certainly not minding it one bit, having a fantastic view of an incredibly intense fight at the north end of the field, trying to compete for this second victory of this race meeting here at Sebring, and one of the last checkered flags of this season. This is a third to last race of these drivers breaking at their elbows a little bit.
Well, I'm not complaining at all. They have put on some great racing so far in these opening 15 or so minutes, nearly halfway through this race. And the fastest lap at the moment going to Van Gortel. He looks very, very speedy. And if he can get past Gattuso, he could be one of the top drivers challenging for the lead of the race. But he needs to get past Fretwell first if he wants to do anything, potentially looking like that now. But again, just cannot get past Fretwell, and getting very twitchy behind Fretwell there into turn 5, and Turfcrew had to check up a little bit to make sure he didn't run into the back of him. And well, he's lost a bit of time now to Fretwell, and well, Alex and Stefan can continue their battle as Danny Lee is going to be laughing right now. He's using this pace advantage to his benefit as Stefan seems to be lacking a little bit. He's just not on the same pace that the cars are around him. But he's just got to defend this position now if he wants any chance of finishing on the podium. As, well, like I said, Danny Lee is just going to be laughing as he romps away 1.7 seconds already.
And that is a huge margin that Daniel Lee has built up thus far. The driver, the 271 car, as we have mentioned pretty much ad nauseum all throughout this broadcast, he's been a quick driver that we've kept our eyes on all throughout this season. But outside that opening race with him in this series at Barcelona, haven't really seen him contend for a race win to the degree that he is right now. Usually, it seems like he's shown the most amount of pace in those 1 hour long races, but here at Sebring, that Mercedes seems to be on rails. Looking through, actually, you know, we mentioned how the Porsches were a little bit up in the air, so to speak, when it comes to the pace that they were showing. I think that's kind of swapped around a little bit because they were showing some pretty good pace during the first race, as we see door-to-door, bumper-to-bumper, side-to-side contact with Luke Van Gortel and Alex Fretwell heading through Sunset Bend. May have these drivers go side by side yet again, heading down the start-finish straightaway. Who is going to prevail to get the final podium position overall? Fretwell, the leader in the Premier class. Van Gortel trying to get a move done to solidly slip his way up into third in class as Fretwell runs wide and loses out on that one spot and may fall into the crutches of Luke Lucchesi right behind. So we may have a fight in the not too distant future between those two racers. But getting back to the point I was going to mention there, Aaron, during that first race, the Porsches seemed to be the car to beat. Now, at this point in this race, we've got Mercedes leading in Elite, a Lamborghini leading in Premier, and we've also got a McLaren leading in Evo. Those gaps are somewhat comfortable as well. Probably the least comfortable gap is Alex Fretwell leading the Premier class at the moment. Only 1.8 seconds though between himself and Bearings. However, he does have the benefit of some cars between himself and Bearings as well.
Might go on a whim here and say that this could be the closest track we've had all season in terms of the cars. Especially just that qualifying was just very, very close. The top 22 cars were separated by a second, and we had a good mixture in there. We had some Lamborghinis, some Ferraris, some Mercedes, of course McLarens and Porsches in there as well, and of course we had a Corvette with Malcolm Coates in there as well. So clearly, I just think that the very balanced nature of this track, it's got a lot of long straights, some medium to sort of high-speed corners, and it's also got some low-speed corners as well. So I think the strengths of each car can come out at a track like this. As, of course, on the long straights, the BMW and the Mercedes, with their big old engines, are going to power on through. But around the tricky stuff, and especially in the low-speed corners, potentially the Porsche will come alive, and in the medium to high-speed, maybe the McLaren might come alive as well. It's a very balanced track. I think the only thing that could make this track better, probably, is if it wasn't so flat. But that's just my opinion. It was an airfield, so it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it very much so stands to reason. It's also in Florida as well, which is about as flat as a pancake. I think the highest elevation in the entire state of Florida is about 272 feet above sea level, so can't be too shocked that we have a track as flat as this one, but even though elevation change practically non-existent around this racetrack, still got a whole lot of airtime in terms of the bumps, so I guess that kind of compensates for it with the small little incremental jumps between one patch of concrete to another. I guess that would add up to like hundreds of feet of elevation change, so I guess that does kind of make up for it in a way, maybe possibly perhaps, Aaron. I'm not too sure what the consensus is on counting bumps as elevation change, but nevertheless, around this track, these drivers are putting on a very good show. Coming up to 20 minutes into this race, about 19 and a half now to be a bit more precise, and looking pretty good for Lee. He's still building that gap in the elite category between himself and Luke Van Gortel, teetering around that 3-second barrier as we see some side-by-side fighting involving Victor Van Zies and Hussein Sarek de Slesser heading through into turn number 10. Looks like they're going to say line astern for the time being, battling for 4th in that premier category, and they've also feeling a little bit of pressure behind with Rob McKee, the Evo driver in that McLaren, right behind.
Has still got a lot of battling left to go in this race. Some important battling, of course, for a lot of our competitors here today. And Lucchesi, well, I mean, like I said earlier on, he kind of needs a bit of a miracle race, and potentially he's been given one. As let's just quickly have a look at where Dana Braga currently is. Just going to have a quick scan through. He's currently 35th. Yeah. I still don't know what happened to him. I don't know if it was on the first or second lap, but yeah, I'm not quite sure if he got caught up in one of those incidents and had to tow back or what. But yeah, 13th place. He's about 9 places, in fact, behind his championship rival. And well, it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the championship, as we can have a look now at what happened. So I think this is on lap 2 or 3 as he comes into turn 2, and oh, that's really unfortunate. I think that was Western, I believe. And you can see there his front right tyre is not connected to the motor vehicle, which, if you don't know, is bad. And that means that he will not be able to continue in the state that he was in, and it did look like that was big damage. He did have to come into the pits, I believe. Let's have a quick little check. He did have to come in, yes. So he probably just got a fast repair, had to give up a lot of places, obviously, and well, it's put him all the way down in 13th. Still setting very good laps, though. Of course, in clean air, you'd expect that from one of our top drivers, but he's going to be frustrated with the way this race has turned out. And it's always been race 2. It's always been his Achilles heel, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's the thing with the incident that we just saw there with Tristan Dennebregi. You bring up a very good point in reference to the fact that these second races have always seemed to be his kryptonite. We saw it in the early stages of this season. He'd do well in the first race, and then the second race, he would get struck by some sort of falling anvil. It's going to happen to him yet again at possibly the worst possible time. Very happy for sure the fact he finished in front of his teammate in that second race. However, this may be a little bit of a bite taken out of that points gap for Luke Lucchesi. If he can just hold on to this position, or maybe even improve his spot side by side, heading down the start finish straight away, Lucchesi and Gattuso. Looks like Gattuso going to try and hold strong on that inside line. Lucchesi trying to hold that on the outside. They're going to be side by side on corner exit. Looks like they're maybe going to finally single file out. No, Lucchesi still hanging strong on that outside line through turn number 3. He finally backs out of it. Lucchesi, despite the fact he finds himself in a very good spot to not to retake the championship lead, but certainly take a big chunk out of it. He's still battling hard. He wants a podium out of this race, a class podium, it should be noted, but a podium nevertheless. I gotta say, one driver who's put on a very good show is Brecht Bearings. He's running in P2 at the moment in the Premier category. However, that 1.9 second gap that he had between himself and Freckwell for the Premier class lead has basically, it's disintegrated. You can see those two drivers running line astern, covered by barely any air. Got, I believe, Ashley Brooks right between them as we see some side-by-side fighting involving Gattuso and Lucchesi. Lucchesi finally slipping his way up into the podium spot. But the Fretwell and Bearings fight in the Premier category, that looks like it's going to heat up soon.
Yeah, it definitely does. Brecht has had a very, very strong race, second race here. Of course, he had a bit of a tough one in the first race, but still managed to finish in first nonetheless. As Ruben, of course, his teammate, it's still such a shame for Ruben. Would have loved to have seen him up there fighting with a lot of these guys. He had some good pace, as we saw throughout the qualifying session. But it is what it is. Brecht carrying on his, I believe it is his brother's name in the Premier class, and potentially could be looking at a very, very good result, as he's got Ashley Brooks in front of him, who as well has had a fantastic day compared to his championship rival Francois Brandet, who's had a pretty awful day here at Sebring. So Ashley now kind of has also put one hand on the trophy, as Alex Fretwell still trying to get past Stefan Gattuso, but still not managing to do that at the moment, as Brecht was looking up the inside there, but just couldn't quite get it done.
Yeah, not close enough to get that maneuver done. That's the thing with a racetrack like this. You don't have, I mean, you got some heavy braking opportunities, but outside of a corner like the hairpin, for instance, turn number 7, not many of them where you could realistically get an overtake done unless you are incredibly decisive in trying to get that move done and just have a huge pace differential between yourself and your competitor. And that's part of the reason why we've got trains like this forming all throughout the field, with these drivers trying to get some moves done and not really successful in their attempts, but they still go forward every now and then. Produce some pretty good racing, though, it must be said, Aaron, with about 4.5 minutes left on the clock for this second race of the night. Sebring is certainly not disappointed, but I think part of the reason why we do have these battles up and down the field, the battles that just do not fizzle out, is down to the fact that even though you've got turns like the Sunset Bend or turn number 1, or even turn number 3 for that matter, certain sections of this racetrack where despite the fact you're braking hard, you still got a corner where you have to lick the stamp, send it, and thread the eye of the needle heading through to try and get a move done.
Yeah, the only harsh braking zone which you can really go for a move is turn 7. And even then, that can be a bit of a tricky one sometimes, as everyone and their mum decides to go extremely wide at Le Mans corner. Saw about 4 or 5 cars there going on grass as they all tried to take the same line as one another. Didn't really work out, as one of the lapped cars on the inside there, making things a tiny bit awkward, but everyone managed to get through fairly cleanly, as Stefan is still trying to defend this position into turn 1, and maybe Alex might be able to get it done, but just again, that outside line just doesn't work. It just washes you out so far. And again, the flat nature of this track, it's fairly bumpy on that outside line. It just puts you off, the car gets unsettled, and well, you just lose a huge chunk of time. So you may as well just sit back and just be patient, wait for those opportunities, as the racing round here can be absolutely fantastic, but also very, very tricky. As we're seeing today, the track position very much is the one you want, as Stefan has been defending pretty much this entire race. He had like 1 or 2 laps at the start where he could take a bit of a break, but ever since then, he's just been non-stop looking in his rearview mirrors.
Yeah, that's a very uncomfortable existence if you're any of these racers finding themselves involved in battle after battle after battle after battle. And here is a replay of Luke King, the Alpha 1 Esports car, the 243, getting a move done, heading down into turn number 7. You just mentioned it, Aaron. That is the one premier overtaking opportunity, and he got it done on a premier driver of Brecht Bearings heading into that corner. So well done from him to gain another spot, as we see the side-by-side fighting continuing here between Fretwell. That's Fretwell and Gattuso side-by-side heading through turn number 14. They're still side-by-side through 15 right now. This is a dangerous game if you're Alex Fretwell, because you're leading it in the premier category, and if you have any sort of drama, you're going to find yourself in a world of hurt drivers running off the track left, right, and center. Look at Ashley Brooks now finding himself involved in that fight. He may try and get a move done here on the not-too-distant future on Gattuso, or maybe even Fretwell. Ashley Brooks, the Evo driver, putting in a brilliant drive at this point in time. A little bit of cone munching there for I believe that was Brecht Bearings a little bit farther in the back of shot. As you can see, this absolute hornet set of race cars going on to the start-finish straightaway for the second to last time. The white flag in the air. One more lap of racing action here from the ESR GT3 Championship at Sebring. This second race has not been disappointing. It's been drama-packed from start to finish, and the drama still looking to continue. Stefano Gattuso mega sideways heading into the corner. Brecht Bearings nearly running into the back of him. Look at Dean Powell and the Danny Lee Racing 222 Mercedes now getting involved in that fight as well. He's going side by side, heading through turn number 5. That, I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, was John Brainback in the 272 car getting involved in that. Leading this pack at the moment, though, is our premier leader of Alex Fretwell. The driver of that 152 car has been incredibly impressive to follow all throughout this race, was nearly in contention for an overall victory. Things not materializing in that regard. However, he still finds himself in a very good position. Speaking of a very good spot, Danny Lee on track for a victory. That gap between himself and Luke Van Gortel has decreased a little bit, but still about 2.5 seconds. So unless Danny Lee gets struck by a falling anvil, it looks like it's going to be game, set, match in that overall fight. And Lee got to take his first victory of the season if he can just hold on for the final half of this lap. Looking though, Luke King running fourth at the moment. Fourth place in the elite category is behind both the Premier and the Evo leader. This is what you get when you have a single kind of car and 3 separate classes. You got this interclass mingling, which is certainly going to give us a heart-pumping finish between these 3 racers. Fretwell and Brooks not really trying to get any sorts of moves done for drivers a little bit farther up the road, because the rest of the field has checked out, as Luke King nearly tried to get a move done on Ashley Brooks heading into Le Mans at turn number 16. Just not close enough to get that move done though. But for Danny Lee, he's going to round that final corner and go on to the start finish straightaway and take the checkered flag victorious for the first time this season. Meanwhile, looking at Fretwell and Brooks, they gave us a brilliant fight throughout this race. 2 drivers running in the other 2 classes that we have going to take their respective class wins, as we have a side-by-side fight to the line with Gattuso and Powell. Gattuso going to round out your top 5 in the elite category, finishing just a matter of hundredths of a second in front of Dean Powell, finishing right behind in 6th. Waiting for some more drivers to cross the start-finish line now, though, Aaron, but that was brilliant.
Yeah, that was a really, really good second race. Hats off to that little pack that we were watching at the front of the field. That was spectacular. The fact that we had such a mix of cars and classes as well. Fretwell up there, of course. Brooks in there as well. He had a fantastic day all round. And, well, I mean, Fretwell did as well, as Breitenbach getting punched into the wall at the end there. A driver who we didn't really talk about often, but had actually a pretty good race, was Matt Hoyland, who, you know, just stayed consistent, just kept exactly pretty much where he finished in the first race. So a decent chunk of points for Matt Hoyland, but of course Bearings is probably a little bit too far gone at this point, and the Belgian can probably firmly say that he doesn't really have to do much else to win that Premier Championship. But yeah, that was a really, really good race to watch from start to finish.
That was absolutely fantastic from start to finish. Gonna take a look at some replays of this hard action heading down into Sunset Bend. That was Stefano Gattuso and Dean Powell, who gave us a brilliant photo finish for P5 in the elite category. You can see Gattuso having that run, blocking off the run from the 22 from the 222 car. However, he got back at him. Those two finished, I say line of stern, they were side by side, but they finished in 5th and 6th respectively as they exited that final corner in. As we take a look at another replay of this involving Andrew Fairley, the ADX Racing esports car. Ooh, very, very close between himself and John Brainback towards the end of that race. Looked like they were fairly clean, still fairly clean into turn number 13, side by side racing into a corner like that. That's usually pretty audacious. It was still audacious there from John Brainback. However, he may have actually gotten that move done, still sticking around the outside of Andrew Fairley, heading down through the braking zone at turn number 15. And it looks like Fairley was able to get that move done in fairly convincing fashion. Terrible puns notwithstanding. That was a brilliant finish to this second race, with some battles all up and down the grid. But Danny Lee going to take the checkered flag when everything is said and done.
Yeah, I can imagine he's going to be very, very pleased with that one, as is Alex Fretwell, who I think that is, if I'm not mistaken, His first win of the season, I believe. I'm going to quickly have Anne look. Just in case I may be being an idiot. And yes, it is. It is indeed his first victory of this season. He's got 4 second places and 1 third. So getting very, very close a few times. But occasionally probably just falling a little bit short. But very good drive from Alex Fretwell, who gets his first win of the season. Same for Danny Lee, who finally gets his first win, as he's been really, really good this entire season. But yeah, just the Mercedes not really being good this entire season.
Yeah, but surprisingly so, the Mercedes was very good here. I mean, Sebring used to be an Air Force base, I believe, so it's very fitting that the car whose front end looks the most like an aircraft carrier takes the checkered flag here at Sebring. Danny Lee with the victory, 2.7 seconds in front of Luke Van Gortel in P2. Luke Lucchesi going to round out your overall podium in third. Finishing a little bit farther back is our premier winner of Alex Fretwell, taking his first victory of the season. Ashley Brooks, on the other hand, this was not his first victory of the season, not even his first victory of the night. That's going to, I wouldn't say entirely solidify it in the Evo Class Championship fight. However, Brooks certainly going to be feeling very comfortable heading into the final 2 races of the season in just 1 week's time. Luke King going to finish right behind in 6th. Brecht Behrings going to finish in 7th. Stefano Gattuso, Dean Powell, and Andrew Fairley going to round out your top 10. I think we'll quickly buzz through the rest of the results here, Aaron, and have a little bit of time to move into some interviews, because we got some very happy men waiting to have a chat with us. Alex Fretwell and Danny Lee, we're going to be having them in the commentary booth in just a couple of moments' time. And as we look through the rest of the finishers from this race, one that featured attrition to be sure, but still a pretty exciting race nevertheless. That's going to sting for Francois Brendet finishing down in 40th. And Aaron, we have 2 drivers waiting in the interview waiting area, 2 very happy men and 2 winners from this race. So who do you like to take dibs on?
I'll talk to the old Danny Lee first. I mean, it would be rude not to. The man who has been very strong this whole season and finally has gotten his first victory of said season. So you join us here, Daniel. It's been a bit of a tough one, but you finally done it. How does it feel?
It's really, really satisfying. I got to be honest with you, especially one like that. It felt earned because I had to pick my way through 5, 6, 7 cars of various descriptions in front of me before I could get there. But as soon as I found myself in 4th place with Stefano, Alex, and somebody else in front of me, Ashley, I think it was, then I could see there was a path to victory, but there was also a fire being lit behind me. So I had to get to them and get past them fast, and I'm just so pleased with that. Everything went the right way.
Yeah, it definitely did. And then you showed very strong pace once you did take the lead. And, well, a quick question about this track and the Mercedes as well is, you know, is this finally a good track and car combination for the Mercedes? It did look fairly strong today.
It appears to be. I'm as surprised as you are. It doesn't happen often, but according to the statistics, the Merc is not just standing on the outside looking in through the window. It's actually in there, competitive, more competitive than the Porsche, it seems, only just by a whisker. But it's nice to have an actual fighting chance, a real fighting chance. The McLaren is still fastest here. I'm not sure how that looked in race 1, because I know that the pace difference was insane and I could not get anywhere near the top 6. But yeah, in race 2, with clear air and a few good laps to do it, and on a track that I really, really love, it was nice to have it all just slot into place.
Yeah, it definitely did. And well, your teammate Dean looked like he was on point as well, apart from that incident in that first race. And so, well, only 1 more round to go then. It's at Laguna Seca in 1 week's time. And, well, unfortunately, you go from 1 week where the Mercedes looks to be very strong to next week where I think I'm correct in saying I don't think the Mercedes is going to be very good. So how are you feeling for that?
I reckon it's probably pointless putting a bet on until you're there on the day in the conditions you got to race in. and the way your mind is sort of, syncing up with your arms and legs, all that kind of stuff. There's so many variables that even if the car was good, I could just be having an off day, and vice versa. But Laguna Seca is a track that I love. I've won there before in the wet, bizarrely. I love the track, I love the car. One last dance before I probably wave goodbye to the Merc for some time, and we'll see what happens, but really looking forward to it. It's been an excellent league so far, super clean.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that you're waving goodbye to the Merc, considering how it's performed for most of this season. Laguna Seca hopefully should be a good race to round off this entire season. And one more little thing before we let you go, and obviously you're going to have to give your usual shout outs. Is this one going to end up on social media?
I reckon there's a few good bits that can be chopped up and put into shorts. I'm sure it might take me a couple of weeks to do it, but I'm sure it'll end up there because there were some nice moments which are just going to leave me glowing for a while.
I can imagine. Well, I hope to see them on my For You page while I'm doom scrolling, and I'll definitely give it a quick like while I'm there. But thank you, as always, Danny, for coming and having a chat with us, and congratulations on that first victory.
Thank you very much, and thanks again to the league admins for doing a grand job, and the rest of the grid. Much appreciated, giving us great races to turn up for every Thursday.
I'm sure they'll appreciate the kind words, Danny. Well, congrats, and go celebrate that win.
Cheers, thank you very much.
And that right there was Danny Lee taking his first checkered flag of this season. Another driver taking their first checkered flag of the season is going to be Alex Fretwell, the winner in the Premier category. Gonna drag him into the commentary booth here to have a quick word with our Premier winner. Now, Alex, that race, just from our perspective in the commentary booth, looked absolutely insane. Finding yourself in the midst of a hornet's nest all throughout race 2, so talk us through it.
Yeah, managed to drop a bit of a Premier bomb in the middle of the elite fight. To be fair, the start, I'm not sure what happened. The front row got fairly close off the line, and one ended up pretty wide, so gained a position straight away, and then we had a decent gap. Sort of quite happy to just sit behind Stefano for a while. But then obviously the others started closing in, so I had to get my skates on. And he defended so hard. It was a little bit tight in places, but I think just about okay. And then it was just sort of, as the other couple were coming through, it was like sort of wanting to go all out, but obviously in the back of my mind, points for the Premier Championship, so it's probably sort of like a 99% fight. And then I got a bit of a dive from one of them, so I thought I'll play it safe at that point. But no, I managed to get Stefano towards the end and take a top 4 overall, which I've not had for a while. I think I might have had a couple of wins very early on in ESR, but certainly not since we've ended up with this sort of multi-class thing. So yeah, nice return to form. And finally warmed up for the first time this week. It's been pretty cold.
I dare to even ask how cold it is in the UK at this point in time. I was hearing from a friend of a friend that it was actually snowing down there. I believe in London is where they live, so it was snowing there earlier on this week. So I dare to even ask how cold it is where you are right now. It's currently about 42 Fahrenheit for me on the east coast of the US, but still certainly going to warm up your soul a little bit with the first victory of this season. A pretty nice way to do it in the process as well. But coming into the final 2 races of this season, actually coming into the final 4, you entered this round 3rd in the championship. Not really within striking distance of the championship leader and pretty much presumptive premier champion Brecht Bearings. However, I still think you have a pretty good shot of catching up to Matt Hoyland in P2, so certainly very happy about that in the championship, or are you just really out there for wins?
No, definitely sort of in there to finish as high up as possible. I know Matt's had a couple of issues in a few recent races, but either I've not maximised my result, or he's ended up, when I look at the results, he's ended up right behind me again, despite that. So he's sort of been doing well despite those issues. But hopefully, this puts me in a decent position for the final race. Not thinking about the championship, obviously. I'm pretty sure that's gone. But yeah, P2 is a nice target, and hopefully we're not too far off.
And as you just mentioned, the last round coming up in 1 week's time, going to be at Laguna Seca. So another American track on the complete opposite coast to this one here at Sebring. But what are your thoughts heading into that race in 1 week's time?
Yeah, it's been a while, but I've done sort of plenty of mileage there over the years. So yeah, try and get back up to speed with it. Certainly not as familiar as Sebring, obviously, with the endurance events, but no, it should be okay. And hopefully the Lambo goes pretty well around there as well, because pretty much from the first lap tonight it was hooked up, just really nice to drive, which isn't always the case, but yeah, really let me push it hard. And like I say, race 1 was pretty much just a procession for me, but race 2 really stuck it on the limit, and yeah, nice reward.
Yeah, that Lamborghini of yours serving you very well, taking the victory in the Premier category, your first of the season, so we want to congratulate on that. Before we let you go and celebrate that win, is there anyone you want to give a thanks to or shout out?
Just my teammate James for turning up and racing with me every week. I know he's had a couple of issues tonight, but overall his pace was really good as well, so hopefully a bright future, and looking forward to next season. Hopefully rack up some decent points. Maybe changing car. We'll see how we go.
I think I heard from a birdie, aka one of our Apex Racing TV colleagues, that the Lamborghini may get a refresh in the world of iRacing in a couple of seasons' time, so that will be something to keep in mind in the not-too-distant future, man. But congratulations on the victory here at Sebring. Well done on the victory, and we hope to see you wherever it is in the not-too-distant future, man. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. Cheers.
And that right there was Alex Fretwell, victorious in the Premier category. But Aaron, one more round left to go. Sadly, it's going to be Thanksgiving in 1 week's time, so I will not be here for the race at Laguna Seca. So I'll pass it off to you for giving us a preview about what that race is going to be. The final two 30-minute long races with some championships to be won and some bragging rights to be claimed.
Well, it's going to be extremely close in pretty much all of our championships, apart from the Premier, probably. So that should hopefully give us something to look forward to. And maybe we could have some shock weather coming in at Laguna Seca, which really should spice up the race in 1 week's time. And of course, I don't celebrate Thanksgiving, so I will be here because I don't think Britons have ever celebrated Thanksgiving. If any of them have, they deserve to be shot. But yeah, enjoy your Thanksgiving next week, Ron. A bit of a shame that you won't be here.
Yeah, I will be gorging myself full of food. So, strangely enough, considering my line of work, I'll be keeping my mouth shut. Actually, opening my mouth for food rather than opening my mouth for a bunch of pixels on a screen. But nevertheless, it's been a pretty awesome series to cover thus far, and I'm sure you and whoever is going to be joining you in the commentary booth are going to have some real fun in just 1 week's time here on Apex Racing TV. If you want to stay up to date of all of the action here on Apex Racing TV, you better remember to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss out on any of the racing action. But I think for this broadcast of the Evolution Sim Racing GT3 Championship, that will just about do it. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Aaron Smith joining me in the commentary booth, and Josh Wilkie doing a wonderful job working on the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching. Have a great rest of your night, and we hope to see you all wherever it is in the not-too-distant future.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, You owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.